Hey YouTube, Simon Dixon here again, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a topic that people have asked me frequently, the Great Reset. So I've just finished my workout, it's wiped off the sweat, and now before I head to work, I'm just going to give you my thoughts on the Great Reset. So firstly, if you didn't watch my video yesterday on how you know whether your country is moving to communism or capitalism, then check out that video and the different shades of grey in between. Now, the Great Reset is the vision set out by the World Economic Forum, and it's summarized in one catchphrase, which is, you will own nothing and be happy. For those of you that are not familiar with communism, and I'm passing no judgment here, communism is an economic thought that was popularized and created by Karl Marx. And if you actually read the economics behind it, it doesn't sound as bad as what is painted to be from the free market. I am way more inclined towards the free market because I believe it gives a greater level of happiness and a higher level of freedom. However, there are many people that believe that they are a slave to capitalism and that the financial system enslaves them, and under a communist ideal they would be a lot happier and they'd be in a more equal society. So don't just take the label that the world has put on it. Be a bit of free thinker and study the different ideologies and come to your own conclusion. And so that's my philosophy. But the Great Reset is the definition of communism. And the definition of communism is you will own nothing and be happy. Why? You won't own anything because communism is about distributing the modes of production across the many and redistributing it equally to all in order to drive their ideal about what happiness is in an equal society. Now, that is the vision of the Great Reset, and the mechanism to achieve the Great Reset in an environment that I've talked about for over a decade now is central bank digital currencies. Central bank digital currencies are designed to drive the world to owning nothing and fulfilling their vision of happiness. And so central bank digital currencies are a way of really deleveraging the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme that we have been operating off through traditional fiat currencies like the dollar, the pound, the euro, the yen. Fiat currencies are created by the private banking sector every time you go deeper into debt, or your company goes deeper into debt, or your country goes deeper into debt. And that creates new money which is backed by debt. Now, what that means is that in order to have more money, you have to have more debt. If you want less debt, you have to have less money. And so this has been regulated by laws in order to create the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme, where in order to have economic growth, you have to have more debt, and you have to have crony capitalism rather than capitalism in order to drive the business cycle up. And therefore individuals, and I talked about in my book, Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust, that individuals, companies and governments, inevitably predictable and guaranteed, go deeper and deeper into debt because there is more debt than money, and therefore in order to pay off the money that doesn't exist, you have to have more debt. And so what does that mean? Well, consequently, the supply of money is always increasing, and when governments need to deal with their next crisis, then they issue up some bonds and borrow either from a central bank that creates money and purchases those bonds, or companies or individuals that lend money to the government because they don't want to be at the mercy and the risk of the credit risk that exists within the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme, which is the banking system. And so what that does is, as the supply increases, it drives people deeper and deeper into debt. Then they have to factor in the interest repayment, and so they have to speculate on assets. And speculate on assets means that it drives money into stock markets in order to counter the increase in money supply that comes from factoring in all this debt repayment, plus the supply of money increasing, leading to too much money chasing too few goods, and therefore price levels rising, driving you into speculation in order to beat inflation, and encouraging spending through the lowering of interest rates, which means it punishes the saver and rewards the borrower. And therefore, the only logical conclusion is, in the world's largest regulated debt-based Ponzi scheme, is to borrow money because the value of the money that you have to repay in the future goes down in value, and the wealth inequality is caused by how people spend their debt. So everybody uses debt, some leverage it in order to purchase assets, and therefore you have real estate and property market bubbles because the bank is willing to lend it to you so that you can buy real estate, because if the loan goes wrong, then they can repossess the property and the real estate doesn't run away. And so therefore you get asset price bubbles in the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme. This drives wealth inequality because those that borrowed money to buy assets end up on the rich side of the equation, and those that borrowed money in order to meet their living expenses and consume end up poorer and poorer and poorer, and therefore you have this ever-widening wealth inequality in the world just due to the nature. And so what is the Great Reset? Well, the Great Reset is saying, okay, we have taken the world's largest regulated debt-based Ponzi scheme to its climax, and now we need to deleverage. How do you unwind all that debt? Well, you have two ways of doing it. One is you could increase interest rates and send everybody that borrowed the money bankrupt, and that's a traditional mechanism. And that would cool down the economy, decrease the money supply, lead to mass defaults on debt, and therefore deleverage the economy and enter into a depressive a depressive cycle. That is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to replace all the money that was created by debt with money that wasn't created by debt. How do you do that? Well, I forecasted a long time ago that what they would do is they would wait for the banking system to hit ginormous risk events like we saw in 2007, and then rather than bail in, which is where the banks pay off their credit and their risk using depositors' money, rather than bailing out, which is where the taxpayers pay for it, and therefore you pay for it in terms of increasing price of goods, inflation, and less expenditure on things that society may want the government to spend things on, and instead give it to bankers and their bonuses like we saw. Another way to do it is to simply issue a new currency that's not backed by debt. This has been done in history. This is not new. America funded its civil war through the issuance of a greenback, which is a non-debt based currency that was created by the government as opposed to the central bank. Now, central bank digital currency would mean a couple of things in the Great Reset. One way to do it is to use, rather than having an independent central bank and Treasury deciding how to spend, and therefore the government needs to borrow from the central bank in order to spend, you have the mergence of the fiscal policy and central bank is one way of doing it, and therefore a central bank digital currency becomes a government digital currency. You can then just issue it. So every time a bank goes bust, for example, you could say nobody loses their deposit, download this app, and you get all the money that you had at the bank, and we can leverage off in the debt markets to an auctioneer, and you replace that money was created not as debt, but you replace debt-based money with debt-free money. This is the reason why central bank digital currencies are being pitched as a technological innovation, because it's a country's last resort. However, there is a side effect. The side effect is you transition from free markets, where money is created as debt through crony capitalism and licenses, driving people into debt, to more of a communist ideal, where that is the Great Reset vision of you will own nothing and be happy. And that is that if we want you to spend your money, then we'll program into the central bank digital currency negative interest rates rather than getting you deep in debt. And if we want you to save money, then we'll program in positive interest rates. And we will also automate tax collection globally to have global taxes. And therefore, at the point of transaction, those transaction-based taxes in a global environment come out, and therefore they're deducted at source. And if there's any default on that, is connected to your passport. And if we have policies that we want to implement, i.e. compulsory vaccines, then we can switch off the central bank digital currency connected to that wallet. And then you end up, and it may not start that way, but look at what we've seen over time. One little bit of power gradually transitions to greater and greater and greater control, larger and larger influence, and that is the great reset. And the mechanism for making it happen is central bank digital currencies. Now, I have become very comfortable with the fact that that is the inevitable, predictable, and guaranteed outcome for those countries, and many countries. But at the same time, there is another great reset. And that great reset is the exact opposite of a central bank digital currency. A central bank digital currency is money that you won't be able to own, you will need permission to use, money that you can't spend unless you spend it in the way that the government wants you to spend it, and money whose supply will be fully determined by the whims of the central bank or the government, depending on how deep down this rabbit hole they go. And therefore its supply and whether you should spend it or not, whether you should be rewarded as a saver or not, becomes the whims of politicians and the whims of central bankers. The opposite of that is something that everybody, many people still today think, and others have thought, is a Ponzi scheme, a currency just for drug dealers, a get-rich-quick scheme, and a way of making more fiat money. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I've tried to help people understand the difference between Bitcoin thinking and fiat thinking. Bitcoin thinkers will be very, very excited by the price correction this week that's happened in Bitcoin, because they're thinking in terms of how much Bitcoin can I buy with my fiat currencies, the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme that goes down in value over time and encourages me to get into debt and not save. How can I swap that for a currency that allows me to own my own money, spend my own money, and rewards the saver because of its fixed supply over the long term, and therefore encourages me to save rather than spend, generate a wealth effect, and get on the right side of wealth inequality? Unless, of course, you're a short-term trader and then you're just speculating and you're a fiat thinker. So trading is fiat thinking. Investing is a very, very rational decision with Bitcoin if you want to counter the trend of the Great Reset. So if you believe that the demand for money you can own, money you can spend, and the counter and money that has a fixed supply that cannot be changed, so you can predictably forecast and plan into the future, goes up, then the demand for Bitcoin means that can only result in long-term price increases as long as the demand goes up. And historically it has. The future does not equal the past, but that is the trend and the Great Reset of the Great Reset. So to me, the Great Reset is central bank digital currencies, and it's a great reset in a direction that drives us more towards you will own nothing and be happy. The Bitcoin thinking mindset is the Great Reset of the Great Reset that drives competition to fiat currencies that says you can own anything and be happy. And so people get to choose in this Great Reset. And the good thing is you can have both. This is the beauty. The Bitcoiner will just be thinking, accumulate as much Bitcoin, think about saving, generate a wealth effect, and then they can invest. However, they can also use that as collateral and borrow a central bank digital currency that goes down in value, and therefore they can hold money that is designed over the long term to go up in value, and borrow money that over the long time is designed to go down in value and meet their expenses there. Now, this was really, really popularized when more recently, firstly, the Bitcoin movement was a bottom-up movement. So when I spoke at the first Bitcoin conference in the world, there were about 40 people in there. And when I wrote the first published book in the world to include Bitcoin, there were a niche handful of people that read that book and ended up on the right side of wealth inequality and this massively changing. And also the book covered the Great Reset, modern monetary theory, a movement towards the metaverse, financial technology, Bitcoin, and all sorts of stuff to prepare people for that over the last decade. This is not a pitch for my book. My book, I give it away free now. I don't really care if you go buy it on Amazon. That makes my publisher a bit of money, not me money. If you want it for free, go to retirementplanb.com/book and you can get a free copy of it and download it there. So this isn't a pitch for the book. This is about protecting your future. The title of the book was Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust. So the Great Reset is the Great Reset of the Great Reset. You can play both of those trends. If you want to immerse yourself in understanding how individuals can get on the right side of these changes, very recently I created a completely free masterclass on retirementplanb.com, over 15 hours of immersion, giving the best of what I got for those that want to get themselves on the right side of the Great Reset. So the Bitcoin movement was a bottom-up movement. It was individuals front run. More recently, Michael Saylor did a great job of educating corporations on how to take advantage of these trends. And now we find ourselves in the most interesting time in financial history, and everybody gets to decide what's right for them and play the Great Reset and the Great Reset of the Great Reset. And so we live in a time now that is completely extraordinary. You as an individual, if you live in a country that gives you choice between central bank digital currencies and Bitcoin, then check out my previous videos. You can make a decision and see which direction your country is moving, communism, capitalism, socialism, and how to have an index of how far it's going to go and whether you want to live in that country. But I appreciate not everybody is in a position to just get up and change. The world has all sorts of different things, and this is where not only corporations but countries, and this is where I have been rabbiting on about what's happening in El Salvador, because in El Salvador this is being done at the country level. This means that in the future countries get to choose by issuing bonds based upon Bitcoin, by making Bitcoin legal tender on top of their own currency or other people's currency, by putting Bitcoin on a central bank's balance sheet and moving to a Bitcoin standard. The country has the opportunity to play the Great Reset, issue their central bank digital currency, and also play and benefit from the Great Reset of the Great Reset. It worked for individuals. It worked for companies. It's now working for pensions that, thanks to the ETF, are now able to put some Bitcoin in there. It worked for hedge funds that are now putting a percentage of their, popularized by Paul Tudor Jones, saying I'm putting some of my hedge funds can have Bitcoin exposure. And it then leads to this game theoretical cat and mouse scenarios where the first mover gets the highest reward and the last mover gets the lowest reward, especially at the central bank level. Now, the last central bank that will be adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet will be, my forecast, the Fed. I believe China probably already has it on its balance sheet because it saw it in 2013 as an attack against the dollar. They won't tell you, obviously, but they released documentaries on Bitcoin in 2013 that painted Bitcoin in very positive light, I believe because they had a propaganda machine and they had self-interest in that. That's all speculation, that's just my perspective, but my forecast is that the Federal Reserve, as it is the most entrenched interest, has the most powerful currency, the dollar. The day the Fed says we've got Bitcoin on our balance sheet is the day that the Fed says the dollar standard is over. We are entering into a monetary renegotiation, as I forecasted. I released a video called The Great Depression of the 2020s in my YouTube channel way back in 2010 or something like that. Can't quite remember. But this is the opportunity that every country has. Now, you as an individual, you get to participate in money you can own, money you can spend. If the effect of Bitcoin does what it's done in the past and acts as it was designed, then you end up with a fixed supply that benefits you as an earlier adopter. And therefore, if you can hold on and save, then you have a wealth effect that may mean that you change your financial future, and you can spend that money without censorship, and you can participate and have an exit from the Great Reset. Now, you can then collateralize that and decide to use a median of exchange. It has less volatility relative to what the price of the goods that you're being expended in, which is the dollar, the euro, the pound. We understand short-term volatility is very, very problematic, which has always been saving in a foreign currency creates new risks. However, this is encouraging and rewarding the long-term saver, and therefore your job, if you accept it, is to figure out how to spend less than you earn, invest the difference, and invest in assets that are designed to appreciate in value rather than assets that are designed to decrease in value, which is what most people that are trying to get above the poverty line do when they start to move into the middle class. They save in currencies that go down in value, if they end up getting on the wrong side of the wealth inequality, then they end up consuming deeper in debt, rather than using the Great Reset and central bank digital currencies to come for what they were designed to do: go down in value, decrease your wealth over time, and drive you into putting it into assets. Otherwise, you end up on the wrong side of wealth inequality that we are seeing rampantly across nations now. But you as a corporation get to do the same. You as a hedge fund get to do the same. You as a pension fund get to do the same. You as an endowment fund at your college or university get to do the same. And now, thanks to the leadership in El Salvador, countries get to do the same, and they're all going to watch. I believe that we are in the reinvention of the entire financial system, and the earlier people adopt and decide to and allocate a percentage as a responsible, risk-managed approach in investing into the Great Reset of the Great Reset. I believe that this is an important thing for most people to consider and educate yourself. I'll continue to educate, I'll continue to release videos as long as you motivate me to go to the gym so I've got more energy by me checking in each morning. I'll continue to create more videos like this. We've got an interesting thing planned. We're going to be releasing, for those that are interested in being and participating in the El Salvador experiment, watch this space, subscribe to this channel. We've got a lot more in store for you. So if you enjoy this video, then do me a favor. I believe that more people need access to such information so they can get on the right side of change. Like this channel, tweet, share, subscribe, hit the bell symbol, hit all, and I'll make sure that I give you updates as the world, as you are involved and you are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Some people are going to be on the wrong side of that change. I want you to be on the right side of that change. So peace, love, unity, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.